Hey, 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 welcome back to Common Mansplaining. I'm Eddie, and that's Christian. And today we're going to be kicking off some more post-election fallout, some post-election reactions. But before we get started, please hit like, please hit subscribe, share this with your closest couple million friends, and that'll really help us get off the ground. We're trying hard to get this thing in the air. So, Trump came out with a couple of plans, a couple of statements as to his expected plan of action the moment he gets in office, the moment he actually gets his feet underneath him. What do you think so far? First impressions.
Well, um, obviously, uh, he's he's done this before. I think in 2016, there's that first shock, like, oh my gosh, I've done it,
Right? I think
and
everybody was.
let's go out for steaks, and everybody's falling like it was like sort of a different level of celebrity. And he's like, wait, um, I was running for this whole office, but it was still sort of very disbelief. The mainstream media narrative was not that this is possible. He definitely had better polling and was expecting a successful outcome, and so I think has better planning for it. But yeah, wants to um, uh, what's
Maybe a little bit.
the efficiency? Oh, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit closer.
Okay, right. His plan for government efficiency, I think, could be very interesting. Um,
Absolutely.
right. Obviously, there are programs that of the New Deal, there was a great need to expand government. But now states have really picked up. Do we really need a national or federal Department of Education? When
It's a good
before,
question.
maybe states all didn't have a Department of Education, weren't staffed up for that. But now they are. Could we transition that back to the states? And having Elon Musk have other people say, like, hey, is this something that the federal government needs to do? Let's have the states do it. Especially with Gavin Newsome coming out and saying, um,
States' rights.
states' rights.
Gavin
States need
Newsom.
to have their independence. Right. So Gavin Newsom is a federalist now.
Yeah, yeah,
So
right.
so he's very because I don't know if you followed what's happening in California, but
A
that
little bit, but catch us all up so that we can all
so
handle it.
California has voted in this presidential election a lot more right than they have in a long time. Trump got 40% of the vote there,
Yep.
which is much higher, and they voted out the ultra left wing mayor of San Francisco. Um, they also voted in a initiative to increase penalties for certain crimes or classify them as felonies. So in general, like things had gotten there hadn't been any pushback for whatever the left had done. There seemed to be some pushback now, some
Right.
appetite for a little bit more centrist, a little bit more right leaning things. Not I mean, there were still some progressive things, some Democratic Socialists of America, not even DNC candidates, won at some local levels in city of Los
Right.
Angeles and Santa Monica. But
Not quite back to Arnold Schwarzenegger yet.
the state overall is, and especially right with bodes. We can talk about this. I'd like to hear your response on this, but that Trump did a lot better with Latinos than with the identity that Latinos have to vote Democrat was sort of they still voted by a majority, but
Yeah.
at more margins supporting a Republican than in a long than well, he set records for at least the ratio
Yeah.
of self-identified Latinos supporting his presidency and Republicans overall down
Yep.
the ticket. And this is big in California, which is a heavily Latino state, and bodes that possibly, that they'll have to at least the Republican Party can at least become a viable opposition party. So I'm sort of interested in how you think what this race said about identity politics and why the Republican message seemed to be beyond simple uh, support people that are in our tribe
Right.
didn't seem to succeed.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very interesting. You said that the Hispanic. I think he won Hispanic men outright. Right. He just like a majority, I think 55% or 53% across the nation, which is an incredible thing for a Republican and even for Trump. And as I mentioned before, the kind of poll shift where we've gone from conservative liberal to populist anti-populist.
Hmm.
It's interesting that that more and more people are just realizing that the Republicans are no longer, kind of like this throwback culture. They've definitely listened to the voter. They've, kind of taken heed to what the voters say. And, all the signs were there this whole time
Hmm.
the election was going on. There, like consistently, the number one thing that people were worried about was the economy and inflation. And the number
Hmm.
two thing that they were worried about consistently was immigration. Like, and there was a bunch of other stuff that was, third,
Even
fourth, and fifth.
Latinos, that was the big thing. And that Latinos would only favor unlimited immigration.
Yeah.
That myth.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think they underestimated what percentage of the Latin American crew that came in the right way, that did everything legally, or at least got themselves into a legal process at very very quickly after they were here. Um, and I think there's something else that not too many people are talking about. It's this Latin X term, and I've spoken with a lot of my friends who are Hispanic, and I've got a ton. And my sister is married to a Hispanic, and they just like when they hear that, it's like you're on another planet. It's like you don't even register to them because you know, despite the fact that many of them were a Democrat this whole time, it's like when you say that, it's like you just don't understand the culture at all because the whole culture is predicated off of gendered nouns, gendered pronouns, and I don't understand how the Democrats missed that. I don't understand how they didn't keep tabs on what the voters consistently said was their most important topic, second most important topic, and I think they paid the price as a consequence. Now, one thing I do want to bring up is this, and this happens, basically every day. There are fanatics on every side of the equation, right? And every day there are extreme examples of both sides of the house. I did see a post with some guys holding a sign up saying things like "women are property" and and homosexuality is a sin, and it struck me odd that those two signs were in conjunction because one is kind of a religious statement and one is has no real bearing in religion. It's kind of weird. And but it's like these are, of course, the examples that pop up as like, oh, this is what the whole world is going to turn into the moment Trump wins an election. I'm like, no, no, no. Those
Yeah,
are very extreme.
Western society is not exploding, and
Right, right.
Western society is so deep and so strong that we can handle the reallocation and the a different priority in government, and
The earth still spins.
can continue.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I mean, and I've seen those, in on the other side of the equation, and I actually did a quick video about it. I heard that there was just an enormous number of suicides after Trump won, and I mean, God, my heart goes out to people if they are really feeling that kind of emotional distress, And I mean, the best thing I can tell you to do is just keep a positive outlook, reach out to your friends and family, because and I'll be the first to tell you that I have my reservations about Trump. Like I'll be the first one to say it.
Yeah,
Now I would never dream of doing something that extreme. I hope nobody else ever goes that route. And please reach out for help if you're in that if you're in that camp. I know how disappointing it could be because I know how disappointed I would have been had Kamala Harris won, right? But
President-elect Kamala
and
Harris would have been a disappointment. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and to be fair, even though Trump won, it's kind of it's like almost like I was going to be disappointed no matter what. but uh, but just guys, make sure that you realize that the world hasn't come to an end. It's everybody is going to. I mean, this happens every 4 years. Just regroup, go back to the drawing board, and if you're a Democrat and you want to continue your message, just start over again and get in touch with the voters again, and you'll be more successful. I promise.
Yeah,
Um,
South Park had an episode sort of after the McCain lost to Obama, kind of satirizing that
oh
sort
yeah,
of shift, and Yeah, it's because the campaigns want us to have an emotional connection to the race. You know, I've
Right.
talked before about the Democrats' appeal straight at the end was an emotional response, a response to our limbic brain and our pleasure, our pain center, not to our analytical neocortex, right?
Right.
And so you, especially because not being a huge Trump fan, weren't taken in by all of his rah-rah rhetoric, have
Right.
been analyzing this whole thing cerebrally from your neocortex. You know what things actually make sense at this time. It's time for the country to move a little bit back more towards the right, to
Right.
respond to this populace, to that it's not um, fatally racist in the end of all Western society to have reduced illegal immigration, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
so you of course would not have, you know, emotional response. You were right. Go and
Right.
continue on with the next day. You're like, oh, he won. I got to keep working. I got to keep living my life. Have
That's
some
it.
fun conversations. But other people who they became very emotionally invested in this, almost like a sports team, because that was the appeal. That was the marketing. That's what they wanted people to have. That when
Right.
they felt this, that they would have such a negative emotional connection to Trump, fascism, these things like that, and not be able to think
Right.
about it rationally. And that is the downside, that people will make rash decisions. Um, Suicide, obviously, is a selfish and short term reaction, an emotional reaction to something because they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But everybody out there, this too shall pass.
Yes,
You
definitely. And
know?
I mean, I wonder, how much of this like hype that's built up is due to, this need to like get money involved in the political process. Like one thing I'm kind of opposed to, even though I'm very, pro free speech, um, I'm not quite so sure how I feel about the spending of money being an expression of speech, especially when it pertains to political elections. And of course, this is kind of like a really fine line, and I have to figure out, kind of like figure out where I stand on it because I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
where I am yet. It's got to be more nuanced than. But one thing I'm not happy about is the way that I feel like Americans at large are just. It's like you mentioned. It's like we're kind of like emotionally gut shot into getting super invested in this process, and as a consequence, of course, we're willing to like donate billions and billions of dollars. I mean, the midterms last time, if I recall correctly, came to like 17, 18 billion dollars just to get like not even a president, you know, just just a midterm election. And I mean, you hear these numbers that Kamala Harris was putting up, which were astronomical. Of course, some of it's Biden and her combined, so it's a little bit different. But I mean, these are some astronomical numbers, and I can't help but wonder if that's the game plan, right? Like to get everybody so invested in it that the money can. Did you ever see the movie? It's a movie like with Steve Carell. Holy cow, what is it called? I think it's like Irresistible or something. It's a funny movie, but it's about yeah, Irresistible. I recommend the movie to anybody who's
Mm-hmm.
seen it, but it's like I don't know if you saw it, but it's about this like small town in some kind of rural area where they build up this candidate into like a national thing where everybody just starts throwing their money there, all their resources into that
Mm-hmm.
county, that district to get that thing. And meanwhile, they're propelling the area around them. The local economy booms. Everything is bing bang boom, and it basically ends up saving the town, which was in trouble. It
Mm-hmm.
was in danger of kind of like puttering out and becoming a
Yeah.
ghost town. And in reality, it was a setup from the start. Like the candidate wasn't even really like a real kind of candidate. The only reason he was in it was to create this giant hype and get everybody involved and stuff. And I just can't help but wonder how much people are being gaslit just to toss their wallet.
Well, definitely those that people that sell media ads, which now the biggest ones are the online players, right? The Facebooks, the YouTubes, um, the streaming services. Those are now the biggest advertisers. Because before it was, yeah, you want to run a campaign in Florida, you've got to buy TV ads in Miami, in Orlando, in Tampa, in Jacksonville, right? It was really
Hmm.
expensive. In California, you've got to buy ads in Sacramento, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, right? Hugely expensive media markets, and that's why you needed these monies for advertising. And now it's switched to streaming, and so people still see money equates to visibility. But there are diminishing returns in
Sure.
advertising. And Trump was such a known commodity. Now here's sort of my reaction when
Yeah, yeah.
we
Mansplain it to me.
on the broader thing. Yeah, let me mansplain this back
Mansplain it.
to when you talk about, so our campaigns in the U.S. are so long,
Hmm.
right? It's the whole year,
Yeah.
really, like with the um, and some people have complained about that. They've said like, oh, because the European model, like when the French start campaigning, they're having elections, right, within a month, right? The British, also have a similar sort of brief election period.
Right.
Um, and they said, can't we do that? Do we have to have such a long, drawn out process?
Right.
So there are pros and cons on that, but definitely the long process is becomes much more emotional appeal, and you have to get grassroots. You have to get people. They're sitting around in meetings. How can we get people fired up? How
Right.
can we get people? Yeah, and to donate, right, and to network, and to
Right.
find these influencers. Who are the people that in their community they're the cool ones, and people watch and say, "Oh, they're doing that." So,
Right.
you want these sort of, and they're scheming this. It's not something accidental. They're deliberately planning all this. But Nancy Pelosi was asked what her thoughts about why Kamala didn't win, and one of her things was she didn't think Kamala had enough time in her 107 days to introduce herself to the country. She didn't get enough public. She's been the vice freaking president for the
Yeah.
last 4 years, but she didn't go through a primary, and so she kind of slotted in there, which seemed super ideal. But now they're saying that was a weakness, obviously. But just now, the Democrats are not going to be in favor of shortening the election cycle or bringing that down. They're going to want to make it longer. They're going to start campaigning, like essentially right after the midterms. Whoever's running for president is going to start, right? So I know people have fatigue
Right
over this,
longer.
but their analysis is that the shorter exposure she had cost her the election.
Yeah. I mean, okay, maybe.
What do you
You know,
think
like
of a British or French style short, deliberately short?
so I'm not as familiar with their style,
Okay.
but I like the idea of a shorter. I mean, one of my biggest critiques of politics in general is that for the first term of a presidency, it's like 80% of his term is let me get reelected, instead of like just focusing on service to the people. So I don't know the best way to tackle that. Like, I don't know that necessarily shortening the campaign cycle actually does that, but maybe it does. I mean, Kamala made so many strategic, unforced errors that I don't think it was the brevity of her
Mm.
campaign. I mean, I think
Mm.
107 days was more than enough for her to espouse her points. The problem was it wasn't enough time for her to learn her points. That was the problem. The problem was they weren't her points to learn. And so
I,
had it not been and the engine trying to teach her the 6 or 7 things out of the 100 things that they wanted to do, then if had it been her own ideas, and I think she could have spoken freely on it, she could have given detail, and she would have reached the American on a much more authentic level
Oh yeah,
because
well, I mean, authenticity. She definitely came across as inauthentic, but I think to some degree too, and I think this was a deliberate plan by her group, was to be try to be nebulous, try not to be well defined, right?
yeah,
Because it worked for Biden. His first campaign, he spent so big chunks of it out of the public spotlight, just doing private fundraising or nothing, and it made it all a referendum about I don't like Trump,
Right.
right? That you're voting for against Trump, and that was seen. I thought she didn't want to have clear answers because she didn't want to come down
Yeah.
on the side of an issue that would risk alienating everyone. It was like she's for everything. I'm for everything Trump says. Yeah, right.
Right.
Um, and so thinking that just making this election about yes Trump or no Trump, she thought there'd be more no Trumps, and so she didn't.
Yeah.
I don't think she really was concerned about defining herself, and she found out that that was an unsuccessful strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. She didn't try at all. I mean, yeah, I noticed that. I mean, there were like 3 or 4 or 20 different social media channels that, like, for the first like 45 days, they were like, it's day number 32 and she hasn't done a single interview. It's day
Mm,
number 33 and she hasn't done a single interview. It's day number, so I mean, it wasn't the
not
length
a
of time. It was,
priority. Not a
yeah,
priority.
she didn't take the opportunities that were available to her. That,
Mm.
and of course, yeah, her VP pick was pretty rough. And there's another element that I think I kind of missed last time, but there's I'm trying to put my finger on the exact words. The Democrat Party for a long time has been more worried about virtue signaling than about just stating a stance and and
Back
just
into
go,
that.
going with it. Yeah, like, because I think there's like all these like little micro groups, and they don't want to offend any of
Mm.
them. And
Well, the Democratic coalition is it's fragile,
it's
right?
very
Palestine
it's
almost
fractured.
fractured it. Yeah.
Right. But so as a consequence, like, for example, the kind of like walking on eggshells she had to do to try to like not bug the Jews, to try to not bug the Muslims, to try to not bug, the trans people, and try to not bug this person, the gay person, like, and it's like all these different like microcosms, and they, in walking on eggshells with all of them, it just meant their whole path was a giant eggshell, path. And so they were stuck without being able to say much, or either that, or she really just is a puppet on strings and could
No,
only
no,
do
I think that's astute analysis that she was not just worried about alienating independent or Republican swing voters or people coming over to her side.
right.
She was worried about her base, right?
Yeah.
Self-identified Democrats and placating them and not since she hadn't gone through a primary, she was worried that she could get an uprising from these people, and so I think that's a good analysis. I think she
Well,
probably
thank
ran with a level of sort of fear of
Yeah.
that, of breaking an egg.
Yep. Yep. And so let's see. If you listen to MSNBC and The View, what you would take away from it is like no mistakes were made. Ran a
Well,
perfect campaign.
no. Right. So they've leaned into some people, have accused Kamala of facing the sort of sexism that people won't vote for a woman for president, things like that. Now, I don't want to say that that doesn't exist. What that is just a headwind. There's a
Yeah.
difference between a hard wall, a glass ceiling, that they say, and just a headwind. I mean, Trump
Right.
had a lot of negatives that he was facing that he had to overcome. The sort
Sure.
of headwind that he's channeling into.
Most
And
of them by
she,
his own design.
yes, self-inflicted,
Right.
self-inflicted, right? And so yeah, so she has a headwind. She's got to come out and say like, all right, a lot of people have reservations and are worried about, you know, how do you overcome that? Well, you go on Charlamagne the God, you go on Joe Rogan, you do a
Right.
lot of interviews.
Right.
And things that she didn't do because of your analysis that she was afraid of. She hadn't been primaried, that she wasn't really locked in and supported widely by her own base.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yeah, I almost, it makes me wonder, had, she really hid from the American people for like the first 45 days. I almost wonder if she would have won had she just stayed hidden. And that scares me because, like, if you looked at the polls, like,
Yeah,
while that was going on, like, while she was hidden, the moment after they announced her coronation, the moment
yeah.
it was like, boo, she like
Everybody,
hit,
everybody gets a bump then. And
and it,
but Trump didn't just sit there and do nothing. He got after being shot at, right?
hmm,
Trump had a bump, and Trump was working to change people's minds, change these Latinos' minds, and get more men on board and say, hey, look, remember, she's not going to change anything about the last 4 years.
Right.
She's
She
going to
was the
change
last one.
nothing. And all the fear mongering you've heard about me, isn't true because I governed for 4 years and Western society didn't end.
Yep. Still here. Let me ask you this question. What are your thoughts on so um, she should I feel in politics something that's been missing for a long time is someone that's willing to take accountability.
Oh,
And
oh,
and,
of
and I
course, of
wonder,
course.
but no, well, of course, of course. Now,
You
yeah, this
need
is
accountability, then you resign and you leave, and you're not on the public stage anymore.
is that how it works though? Like, so here, my
To a
thoughts
large
were
degree.
like, if I were Kamala Harris, right, the way that I would handle it, maybe this would be
Mm-hmm.
political suicide. Maybe this is just not the way to do things. Maybe this just it like focus groups just show that this doesn't work. But if I were Kamala Harris, I would have said, look, I'm not Biden. I respect him as a leader, but I'm not the person making those decisions. And there are various things that I would have done differently. All respect to him, but this is how I would handle it. This is how I plan to do it going forward. I wasn't number one last time. So then she could have actually run as the candidate of change, which she wanted to be. But because she wasn't willing to do that, because like she didn't even want to touch, again, it was more eggshells. She didn't even want to touch the concept of like anything that even approached self criticism or like self party criticism. She wasn't able to take that position. But it would have been, I feel
Yeah.
like she could have easily distanced herself. Um, I feel like just the fact that they,
Well, that she didn't
yeah,
lent into the narrative that she was the figurehead for really an Obama-led, brain trust that was going to govern the country through her.
right.
Right, the puppet that you said. I don't think she was a puppet, but these type of things lend credence to that.
Yeah, very true. Very true. What do you guys think? I'd love to see all these comments below. Tell me what you think about the election. Tell me what you think about, what Kamala Harris did perfect, what she did bad, what you would have done differently. We're interested in hearing like everybody's thoughts on this matter, and then we'll catch you next time on Common Mansplaining.